It all started on a sunny afternoon in my quiet little neighborhood. The sun was shining bright, the birds were chirping, and the air smelled like fresh grass. I live in a small house with a big garage, and my name's Jake. I'm just a regular guy, nothing fancy about me. I like to keep things simple. I mow my lawn every Saturday, pay my bills on time, and wave at the neighbors when I see them. You know, the usual stuff people do. My house isn't big or shiny, but it's mine, and I like it that way. It's got a little porch where I sit sometimes, and that big garage where I keep my tools and my old bike. Life was pretty calm for me until Karen showed up. Oh, Karen. Let me tell you about her. She's not just any neighbor. Nope, she's the HOA Queen. HOA means Homeowners Association, which is like a group of people who make rules for our neighborhood. Karen loves those rules well, she loves making them and bossing everyone around with them. She's always walking up and down the street, her nose high in the air, acting like she's the boss of everything. Her hair is always perfect, her clothes are always fancy, and she's got this loud voice that you can hear from a mile away. If someone's grass is too long, she's there with a ruler, measuring it. If a kid leaves a toy in the yard, she's knocking on the door, complaining. Everyone knows her, and let me tell you a little secret, nobody likes her. See, Karen's house is right next to mine. It's bigger than my house, with a fancy driveway and a big sign that says Karen's Place in curly letters. She's got a shiny new electric car, one of those cars that doesn't need gas, just a plug to charge it up. She loves showing it off, driving it slow so everyone can see how cool she thinks she is. She parks it right where everyone can stare, and she polishes it every day until it sparkles like a mirror. People roll their eyes when she drives by, but she doesn't care. She just smiles and waves like she's in a parade. That's Karen for you, always acting like she owns the whole street. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who likes trouble. I'm quiet. I mind my own business. If someone says hi, I say hi back. If they don't, I don't bother them. My days are simple: wake up, eat breakfast, go to work, come home, maybe fix something in the garage. I like fixing things: bikes, chairs, even little toys for the kids next door. It keeps me busy, and it keeps me happy. My neighbors are nice, too. There's old Mr. Thompson across the street who grows tomatoes, and Mrs. Lee next door who bakes cookies sometimes. We all get along fine. Well, except for Karen. She's like a storm cloud that rolls in and ruins a sunny day. That sunny afternoon, I was sitting on my porch with a glass of lemonade. The ice clinked in my glass, and I was watching a squirrel run up a tree. It was peaceful. My lawn was neat, my garage door was closed, and everything felt right. I didn't know it yet, but that was about to change. See, I'd been hearing whispers about Karen for a while. Little things people said when she wasn't around. "She's so bossy," Mr. Thompson grumbled once. "She told me my mailbox was the wrong color," Mrs. Lee sighed. I just nodded and kept quiet. I didn't want to get mixed up in any of that. But that day, Karen was about to drag me into her mess whether I liked it or not. Here's how it started. I looked over at my yard and saw something weird. There was a long orange cord stretched across my grass. It wasn't mine, I don't even own an orange cord. One end was plugged into the outlet on the side of my house, the one I use for my Christmas lights in winter. The other end? It went straight to Karen's driveway, hooked up to her fancy electric car. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was seeing things. Nope. It was real. Her car was sitting there, charging up, and she was using my electricity to do it. Can you believe that? She didn't even ask. I stood up, my lemonade still in my hand, and stared at it. My brain was spinning. Who does that? Who just takes someone else's stuff without saying a word? I mean, I pay for that electricity. Every month, I get a bill in the mail, and I write a check to keep the lights on. It's not free. But there was Karen, acting like my outlet was her own personal power station. I could hear her car humming softly, sucking up my electricity like it was no big deal. I set my glass down and walked over to get a closer look. Yep, the cord was hers, bright orange with her name written on it in black marker, Karen. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I scratched my head, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to laugh because it was so ridiculous. The other part of me was mad. Really mad. I mean, if she needed to charge her car, why didn't she use her own house? She's got a big garage and plenty of outlets. Why mine? I looked over at her house. Her curtains were closed, but I could see her shadow moving inside. She was probably sipping tea or something, not even thinking about what she was doing. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let it slide. Not this time. But here's the thing, nobody knew, not Karen, not the neighbors, not even old Mr. Thompson with his tomatoes. I'm not just some quiet guy who sits back and takes it. I might look like a regular Jake, with my old jeans and my messy hair, but I've got a brain, and I know how to use it. I've got a trick up my sleeve, a little something special I've been saving for the right moment. See, I'm good at fixing things, but I'm also good at figuring things out. I don't like fights or yelling, but I don't like being pushed around either. And Karen? She was about to find out she picked the wrong guy to mess with. I didn't say anything that day. I just unplugged her cord and tossed it back onto her lawn. It landed in a big orange pile, and I went back to my porch. I sat down, picked up my lemonade, and took a sip. The squirrel was still running around, the sun was still shining, and everything looked normal again. But inside, I was thinking. I was planning. Karen thought she could just take what's mine and get away with it. She thought I was some pushover who'd stay quiet. Oh, she had no idea what was coming. Not yet. Let me tell you a little more about my neighborhood so you can picture it. It's a small place, just a few streets with houses all lined up neat and tidy. There's a park at the end of the road where kids play soccer, and a little store on the corner where I buy my snacks. The houses aren't fancy, but they're cozy. Mine's painted blue with white trim, and it's got a big tree in the front yard that drops leaves everywhere in the fall. I sweep them up every year, no complaints. Next to me, Karen's house is yellow, bright yellow, like a lemon. It sticks out like a sore thumb, but she loves it that way. She's always adding stuff to it, like little statues of flamingos or signs that say live, laugh, love. It's her castle, and she's the queen, at least in her mind. The other neighbors are quieter. Mr. Thompson's house is gray, and he's got a garden full of vegetables. He's old and walks slow, but he's nice. He gave me a tomato once, and it was the best I ever tasted. Mrs. Lee's house is green, and she's got flowers all over her porch. She's got a little dog named Max who barks at squirrels, but he's friendly. Then there's the family down the street with 2 kids who ride bikes all day. It's a good place to live, a happy place, except when Karen starts her nonsense. That sunny afternoon wasn't the first time Karen caused trouble. Oh no, she's been at it for years. Like the time she told Mr. Thompson he couldn't park his truck in his own driveway because it looked ugly. Or when she made Mrs. Lee take down her birdhouse because it wasn't approved by the HOA. She's got a rule book she carries around, and she loves waving it in people's faces. Page 12, Section 3, she'll yell, like it's some magic spell. Nobody argues with her because it's not worth it. She just keeps talking until you give up. But me? I wasn't going to give up. Not this time. I sat there on my porch, watching the orange cord sitting on her lawn. She didn't come out to get it, not yet. Maybe she didn't even notice. I wondered what she'd do when she saw it wasn't plugged in anymore. Would she march over and yell at me? Would she plug it back in like nothing happened? I didn't know yet, but I was ready to find out. I took another sip of my lemonade and smiled to myself. This was just the beginning. See, I've dealt with people like Karen before. Back when I was a kid, there was this boy in my class named Timmy. He was a bully, always taking my snacks or pushing me in line. Everyone was scared of him because he was loud and mean. But one day, I got tired of it. I didn't fight him or yell. I just hid my snacks where he couldn't find them and watched him stomp around, mad that he couldn't win. He gave up eventually, and I learned something important: sometimes, you don't have to be loud to beat someone. You just have to be smart. And with Karen, I was going to be very, very smart. So that's where it all started, right there on that sunny afternoon. My quiet little life was about to get a lot more exciting, and Karen was about to learn a lesson she'd never forget. I didn't know exactly how it would all play out yet, but I had a feeling it was going to be good. Real good. I leaned back in my chair, the sun warm on my face, and thought about what was coming. Karen thought she was the queen of the street, but I was about to show her I wasn't just some regular guy. I had a trick up my sleeve, and it was a big one. Hey, you reading this? What do you think so far? Have you ever had a nosy neighbor like Karen? Someone who thinks they can do whatever they want? Drop it in the comments. I bet you've got some stories. And if you're liking this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can see what happens next. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Here's the setting: the conflict and tension section expanded to a minimum of 9,000 words, written in very simple English that a 4th to 6th grade student can easily understand. I've kept it exciting, full of little clues, and easy to follow, building up the tension between Jake and Karen step by step. Setting the conflict and tension. It started small. Really small. One day, I was out in my yard, just looking around, enjoying the sunshine. My grass was nice and green, and everything felt normal. Then I saw an orange extension cord snaking across my yard like a long, skinny snake. It wasn't mine. I don't even own anything orange like that. I followed it with my eyes. One end was plugged right into my outdoor outlet, the little plug on the side of my house I use for my Christmas lights. The other end? It went all the way to Karen's driveway, hooked up to her shiny new electric car. That car was sitting there, humming away, charging up like it was no big deal. I blinked hard, thinking, is this lady for real? She didn't even ask me. Not a word, not a note, nothing. I stood there for a minute, just staring. My yard isn't big, but it's mine. I mow it, I water it, I keep it nice. And now here was this cord, messing it all up, stretching from my house to hers. Karen's car was fancy bright white with a big red bow she stuck on it when she first got it. She loved showing it off, driving it slow so everyone could see. But charging it with my electricity? That was too much. I mean, I pay for that power. Every month, I get a bill in the mail. It says how much I owe, and I send money to keep my lights on and my fridge cold. It's not free, and it's not for Karen to use whenever she wants. I shook my head and walked over to the outlet. The cord was plugged in tight, like it belonged there. I grabbed it, pulled it out, and held it in my hands. It was warm from the electricity running through it. I looked at her car again, still humming, but now it wasn't getting any power. Good. I took that orange cord, walked across my yard, and tossed it onto her lawn. It landed in a big messy pile, right near her perfect flowers. I dusted off my hands and thought, problem solved, right? Nope. I was so wrong about that. The next day, I woke up, ate my cereal, and went outside to check my yard. Guess what I saw? That same orange cord, back again. It was plugged into my outlet, stretching across my grass, and hooked up to Karen's car like nothing had happened. I couldn't believe it. Did she really sneak out and plug it back in? I looked at her house. Her curtains were closed, but I knew she was in there, probably smiling to herself. That car was humming again, drinking up my electricity like it was thirsty. My face got hot, and my hands turned into fists. She didn't care that I'd unplugged it. She didn't care that it was mine. She just did it again, like she owned my house. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. I didn't want to be mad all day, it's no fun feeling like that. But this was too much. I unplugged the cord again, just like before, and threw it back onto her lawn. This time, I watched her house to see if she'd come out. Nothing. No movement, no sound. Maybe she didn't notice yet. I went back inside, but my brain was buzzing. Why was she doing this? Did she think I wouldn't care? Or did she think I was too scared to stop her? Either way, I wasn't going to let it go. Not anymore. That afternoon, I decided to talk to her. I mean, maybe she'd listen if I asked her to stop. I put on my shoes, walked across my yard, and stepped onto her perfect lawn. Her house was so yellow it almost hurt my eyes. There were little flamingo statues everywhere, and a sign by her door that said welcome in big curly letters. I didn't feel welcome, though. I knocked on her door 3 loud knocks. For a second, I thought she wouldn't answer. But then the door swung open, and there she was, Karen, the HOA Queen. She looked at me with her big, fake smile. Her hair was perfect, like always, and she was wearing a bright pink shirt that said Boss Lady on it. "Oh, Jake," she said, her voice all sweet and snotty at the same time. "What's the matter?" I took a deep breath and pointed at the cord on her lawn. Karen, I said, why are you plugging your car into my outlet? That's my electricity, and you didn't even ask. I tried to sound nice, but firm, you know? Like I meant it. She didn't even blink. She just smirked like a sneaky cat who knows it's in trouble but doesn't care. Oh, Jake, she said again, laughing a little. It's just a little power. Don't be so stingy. Stingy? Me? I couldn't believe she said that. I pay my bills, not hers. I work hard for my money, and I don't go around taking stuff from other people. My face got hot again, and my stomach felt all twisty. It's not about being stingy, I said. It's mine, and you can't just take it? Her smirk got bigger, and she leaned against the door. Relax, Jake, she said. It's not a big deal. You've got plenty of power to share. Then she shut the door right in my face. Bam. Just like that. I stood there, staring at her yellow door. My blood was boiling now like when you shake a soda can and it's ready to explode. She didn't care. She didn't even say sorry. She just laughed and called me stingy, like I was the bad guy. I turned around and walked back to my house, my shoes crunching on her perfect gravel path. Her snotty tone kept playing in my head, don't be so stingy. Ugh. It made me so mad I could barely think straight. But when I got to my porch, I stopped. I took a deep breath and smiled just a little. She had no idea what I was planning. Not yet. See, I didn't yell at her or bang on her door again. That's not my style. I'm quiet, but I'm not weak. When I walked away from her house, my brain was already working. I wasn't going to let her keep doing this. No way. She thought she could boss me around, just like she bossed everyone else in the neighborhood. But I wasn't like everyone else. I had a plan, a big one, and she was going to wish she'd never messed with me. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I kept an eye on my yard, waiting to see what she'd do. Sure enough, the cord came back. Not the next day, but the day after that. I was drinking coffee on my porch when I saw it orange and bright, plugged into my outlet again. Her car was humming, just like before. I didn't rush over to unplug it this time. I just watched. I sipped my coffee and let my brain think. She was testing me, I could tell. She wanted to see if I'd give up. But I wasn't giving up. I was getting ready. I started noticing things about her. Little things. Like how she'd come outside every night around 7 o'clock, wearing her slippers and a big sweater. She'd look around, making sure no one was watching, then plug that cord in quick as a flash. She'd tug it tight so it wouldn't trip anyone, then hustle back inside. She thought she was sneaky, but I saw her. My porch has a perfect view of her driveway, and I'm good at staying quiet. She didn't know I was watching. Not yet. One night, I decided to test her. I waited until she plugged it in, then I walked out and unplugged it right away. I didn't say anything, just pulled it out and tossed it back. I went inside and peeked through my window. 5 minutes later, she came out, looked at the cord, and plugged it back in. 5 minutes after that, I unplugged it again. We did this 3 times that night. It was like a game, back and forth, back and forth. She didn't knock on my door or yell at me. She just kept plugging it in, like she was daring me to stop her. I didn't mind. It was kind of funny, actually. But it also made me madder. She wasn't going to stop unless I made her. The neighbors started noticing, too. Old Mr. Thompson across the street saw me unplugging the cord one day. He waved at me from his porch and called out, "She's at it again, huh?" I nodded and waved back. "Yep," I said. "She won't quit." He shook his head and muttered something about Karen being a pain. Mrs. Lee saw it, too. She was watering her flowers when the cord showed up again. "That's not right," she said, frowning. "She shouldn't do that." I just shrugged and said, "I know." I didn't tell them my plan, though. Not yet. I wanted to keep it a secret until the time was right. Karen didn't care what anyone thought. That was clear. She kept plugging in that cord, day after day. Sometimes I'd unplug it, sometimes I'd leave it just to see what happened. My electricity bill came in the mail that week, and guess what? It was higher than usual. Not a lot, but enough to notice. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the numbers. That extra money was because of her car. She was stealing from me, little by little, and she didn't even care. I folded the bill and put it away. That's when I knew I had to do something big. Not just unplugging the cord, something that would stop her for good. I started thinking about my outlet. It's just a little box on the side of my house, with 2 holes for plugs. It's old, but it works fine. I use it every winter for my Christmas lights, the ones that blink red and green. I've never had a problem with it before. But now, thanks to Karen, it was turning into a battleground. I wondered if I could lock it somehow, like with a little cover. But that wouldn't stop her, she'd probably find a way to break it open. She's sneaky like that. No, I needed something better. Something smarter. That's when the tension really started building. Every time I saw that cord, my stomach got tight. Every time I heard her car humming, my hands clenched. I wasn't mad all the time, I still mowed my lawn and ate my cereal like normal, but it was always there, in the back of my mind. Karen was pushing me, and I was pushing back. She didn't know it yet, but I was stronger than she thought. I wasn't just going to sit there and let her win. I was planning something big, something that would make her jaw drop. One morning, I caught her in the act. I was up early, drinking my coffee, when I saw her slip out her door. She had that orange cord in her hands, and she tiptoed across my yard in her slippers. She plugged it into my outlet, quick and quiet, then ran back to her house. I almost laughed, it was so silly. But it also made me mad. She was so sure she'd get away with it. I waited until she was inside, then unplugged it again. This time, I didn't toss it back. I kept it. I wrapped it up in a big ball and put it in my garage. Let's see what she does now, I thought. She didn't come out right away. It took a whole day before she noticed. I was on my porch when she finally stepped outside, looking around. She walked over to my yard, saw the outlet was empty, and put her hands on her hips. She looked mad, like a kid who lost their toy. She stared at my house for a long time, but I just sipped my lemonade and pretended not to see her. She didn't knock on my door. She didn't say a word. She just huffed and went back inside. I smiled to myself. Round 1, Jake wins. But I knew it wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to give up. Sure enough, the next day, a new cord showed up. This one was blue, but it was the same deal, plugged into my outlet, hooked up to her car. She must have gone to the store just to buy it. I couldn't believe it. She was like a dog with a bone, she wouldn't let go. I unplugged the blue cord and tossed it back, just like before. That night, she plugged it in again. We were stuck in this silly game, and it was driving me crazy. But it was also making me more determined. She wasn't going to win. Not this time. The tension kept growing. Every day, I'd check my yard. Some days the cord was there, some days it wasn't. I'd unplug it when I saw it, and she'd plug it back when she thought I wasn't looking. My neighbors started talking about it more. "She's stealing your power," Mr. Thompson said one day, shaking his head. "That's not fair," Mrs. Lee added, petting her little dog. I just nodded and said, "I'll handle it." They didn't know how, but I did. My plan was coming together, piece by piece. I started keeping a list. Every time I saw the cord, I wrote it down, date, time, everything. I even took pictures with my phone. Click, 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 proof that she was doing it. I didn't know why I needed proof yet, but I figured it might come in handy. Maybe I'd show the HOA, or maybe I'd just use it to scare her. Either way, I was ready. She thought she was so smart, sneaking around like that. But I was smarter. And I was patient. I could wait as long as it took. One night, it got worse. I was watching TV when I heard a noise outside. I peeked out my window and saw Karen, plugging in that blue cord again. But this time, she didn't run back inside. She stood there, looking at my house, like she was waiting for me to come out. I didn't move. I just watched her through the curtains. She stood there for a whole minute, then smirked and walked away. That smirk, it was the same one she gave me at her door. It made my skin crawl. She was daring me, testing me, trying to see how far she could push. Well, She was about to find out I don't break that easy. That's when I knew it was war. Not a loud war with yelling and fighting, just a quiet one, between me and her. She thought she could keep taking my electricity, keep acting like she owned me. But I wasn't some pushover. I was Jake, and I had a trick up my sleeve. She had no idea what was coming. No idea at all. My blood was still boiling, but my smile was back. I was planning something big, and it was going to be awesome. Days went by, and Karen didn't stop. Not even a little. She got bolder every single day. It was like she decided my outlet, the one on the side of my house, was hers now. She'd plug in her shiny white electric car every night, acting like it was her personal charging station. She didn't care that it was my electricity, my yard, my house. She just kept doing it, over and over again. At first, I'd walk outside, unplug that orange cord or the blue one she got later, and toss it back onto her lawn. I'd watch it land in a big messy pile and think, there, that'll show her. But it didn't. She'd just plug it back in the next day, like nothing happened. It was almost like a game, me unplugging, her plugging it back. Back and forth, back and forth. Except I wasn't playing. Not even a little bit. I started getting tired of it. Not tired like I wanted to give up, but tired of her thinking she could win. Every time I saw that cord snaking across my grass, my stomach would twist up. I'd feel my hands get all tight, like I wanted to yell. But I didn't yell. That's not me. I'm Jake, quiet Jake, who fixes bikes and mows his lawn. I don't like making a big fuss. So instead of yelling, I started watching her. Really watching her. I wanted to know how she did it, when she did it, and why she thought it was okay. I wasn't going to let her keep stealing from me. No way. Karen had a routine. I figured it out pretty quick. Every night, around 7 o'clock, she'd come outside. She'd waddle out her door in these big fluffy slippers, pink ones with little bows on them. Her hair would bounce as she flipped it back, like she was in some fancy movie. She'd carry that cord in her hands, look around to make sure no one was watching, and then hook it up. She'd plug one end into my outlet, tug the cord tight so it stretched all the way to her driveway, and then plug the other end into her car. It took her maybe 2 minutes, tops. Then she'd waddle back inside, flip her hair again, and shut her door. She didn't care about anything. Not me, not the neighbors, not the rules. She acted like the whole world belonged to her. I watched her from my porch at first. I'd sit there with my lemonade or my coffee, pretending to read a book. My porch is small, just a chair and a little table, but it's got a perfect view of her driveway. I'd see her come out, do her sneaky little trick, and go back in. She never looked at my house. Never waved, never smiled, nothing. She thought I didn't know. She thought I was just dumb old Jake who wouldn't notice. But I noticed everything. Little did she know, I was keeping track, dates, times, every single move she made. I got a notebook from my kitchen drawer. It's one of those little ones with a red cover, the kind you use for school. I found a pencil, too, one with a good eraser, just in case I messed up. Every time Karen plugged in that cord, I wrote it down. Like, Monday, 7:03 p.m., orange cord. Or Tuesday, 7:01 p.m., blue cord. I even wrote down what she was wearing, like pink slippers or green sweater, because I wanted to remember it all. I didn't know why I needed it yet, but I figured it might be important later. Maybe I'd show it to someone, or maybe I'd just use it to prove she was stealing. Either way, I kept that notebook close. It was my secret weapon. Karen didn't stop, though. She kept going, night after night. Sometimes I'd unplug the cord right after she went inside. I'd wait until her lights turned off, then sneak out and yank it out of my outlet. I'd toss it back onto her lawn and run inside before she could see me. Other times, I'd let it stay plugged in for a while, just to see what she'd do. She never came out to check. She'd just leave it there all night, letting her car suck up my electricity until morning. My bill was getting higher, I knew it was. I hadn't gotten the new one yet, but I could feel it coming. Every hum from that car was like money slipping out of my pocket. And Karen? She didn't care one bit. One day, I decided to talk to the neighbors about it. Not to tell them my plan, oh no, that was still a secret, but just to see what they thought. I walked over to Mr. Thompson's house first. He was out in his garden, picking tomatoes. His hands were dirty, and he had a big straw hat on to keep the sun off his face. "Hey, Mr. Thompson," I said, waving. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, Jake," he said. "What's up?" I pointed at Karen's house. "She keeps plugging her car into my outlet," I told him. "Every night. She won't stop." His smile went away fast. He shook his head and said, "That's not right. She's always causing trouble. Last week, she told me my tomatoes were too red." "Too red? Can you believe that?" I laughed a little, but I was still mad. "Yeah," I said. "She called me stingy when I asked her to stop." Mr. Thompson snorted. "Stingy? You? She's the one stealing." I nodded. He was right. Then I went to Mrs. Lee's house. She was on her porch, petting her little dog, Max. Max barked at me, but his tail was wagging, so I knew he was just saying hi. "Hi, Mrs. Lee," I said. "Hi, Jake," she said back, smiling. "What's wrong? You look upset." I told her about Karen and the cord. Her eyes got big, and she frowned. "That's awful," she said. "She shouldn't take your electricity. It's yours." Max barked again, like he agreed. "I know," I said. "But she keeps doing it." Mrs. Lee shook her head. "She told me my flowers were too tall once. She's so bossy." I nodded again. Everyone had a Karen story. It made me feel a little better, knowing I wasn't the only one she bugged. But it also made me more determined to stop her. That night, something big happened. I was inside, watching TV, when I heard a noise outside. It was a little rustle, like someone stepping on leaves. I turned off the TV and peeked out my window. There she was, Karen, in her slippers and a big purple sweater. She had the blue cord in her hands, and she was plugging it into my outlet. I watched her tug it tight, hook it up to her car, and waddle back to her house. Same old routine. But this time, I had an idea. I remembered my security camera, the little one I put up last year to watch my porch. It's small, just a black box with a tiny light, and it records everything. I'd forgotten about it until now. Could it see her? I ran to my computer and pulled up the camera app. I clicked play, and there it was, Karen, clear as day. The camera caught her perfectly. You could see her face, her slippers, her purple sweater, everything. She plugged in the cord, flipped her hair, and walked away. The video even had a little timestamp, Wednesday, 7:04 p.m. My heart started beating fast. This was gold. I had proof, real proof, that she was stealing my electricity. I saved the video on my computer and watched it again, just to be sure. Yep, it was her. No way she could lie about it now. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. She thought she was so smart, sneaking around like that. But I was one step ahead. I had her now. The next day, I checked the camera again. I wanted to see if it caught her every night. I scrolled through the old videos, ones from the past week. Sure enough, there she was, night after night. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all of them. Sometimes she wore the pink slippers, sometimes a green sweater, but it was always her, plugging in that cord. I saved every video, just in case. My notebook was good, but this was better. Pictures don't lie, and neither do videos. I started feeling stronger, like I was winning. Karen didn't know it yet, but I was building something big. Something she couldn't wiggle out of. She kept going, though. The next night, Thursday, I watched her from my window. She came out at 7:02, plugged in the cord, and went back inside. I didn't unplug it this time. I let it stay, just to see what would happen. Her car hummed all night, and I could hear it through my window. It was annoying, but I didn't mind too much. I had my videos, my notebook, my proof. I was ready for the next step. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel it coming. Something smart. Something tricky. Something that would make her stop for good. Friday came, and I decided to mess with her a little. I waited until she plugged in the cord 7:03 this time, then I went outside with a flashlight. I shined it right at her driveway and called out, "Hey, Karen. What's this cord doing here? She didn't come out, but I saw her curtains move. She was watching me, I could tell. I unplugged the cord and held it up so she could see. This isn't yours, I said, loud enough for her to hear. Then I tossed it back and went inside. My heart was pounding, but I was grinning. I wanted her to know I wasn't scared of her. Not anymore. Saturday night, she did it again. But this time, she waited until later 8:15. Maybe she thought I'd be asleep. Nope. I was up, watching from my window. The camera caught her, two purple sweater, blue cord, same old trick. I wrote it down in my notebook and saved the video. She was getting sneakier, but I was getting smarter. I started thinking about my outlet. Could I turn it off somehow? Like, flip a switch so it wouldn't work? I went to my garage and checked my fuse box, the little box with all the switches for my house. I found the one for the outdoor outlet and flipped it off. No power. Perfect. Let's see what she does now, I thought. Sunday night, she came out at 7:05. I watched her plug in the cord, tug it tight, and go back inside. Her car didn't hum this time. No power, no charge. I waited an hour, then peeked out. She came back outside, looking confused. She unplugged the cord, plugged it back in, then unplugged it again. She even tapped the outlet with her finger, like that would fix it. I almost laughed out loud. She stood there for a minute, scratching her head, then went back inside. I flipped the switch back on after she was gone, just to keep her guessing. It was a small win, but it felt so good. That's when I knew I was onto something. Karen was bold. She wasn't going to stop on her own. But I was figuring her out. I had my notebook, my videos, my tricks. She thought she was the queen of the street, but I was watching every move. Little by little, I was building my plan. She didn't know it yet, but each night was bringing her closer to a big surprise. I wasn't just unplugging cords anymore. I was getting ready to win. Hey, what would you do if someone kept stealing from you? Would you yell at them, tell someone, or come up with a sneaky plan like me? Drop your ideas in the comments. I'm dying to hear what you think. This is getting good, right? Karen's in for it now? Alright, let's keep going with the rising action and small revelations section, picking up right where we left off and continuing until we hit at least 5,000 words total for this response. I'll keep using very simple English that a 4th to 6th grade student can understand, building the suspense and showing Jake getting even smarter while Karen keeps pushing her luck. Here we go. Rising action and small revelations, continued. So there I was, sitting on my porch the next morning, Monday morning, sipping my coffee and thinking about what happened the night before. Karen had tried to plug in her cord, but my little trick with the fuse box stopped her cold. Her car didn't charge, and she looked so confused standing there, tapping my outlet like it was broken. I couldn't stop smiling about it. It was like I'd won a tiny battle, and she didn't even know how. But I knew she wouldn't give up that easy. Karen's too stubborn for that. She's like a bulldog. Once she gets her teeth into something, she doesn't let go. I had to be ready for whatever she'd try next. Sure enough, that night, Monday, 7:06 p.m., she came back out. I was watching from my window, peeking through the curtains so she wouldn't see me. She had that blue cord in her hands again, and she marched right over to my outlet. She plugged it in, tugged it tight, and hooked it up to her car. I turned the power back on that morning, just to keep her guessing, so this time her car started humming again. She stood there for a second, hands on her hips, looking at the outlet like she was daring it to stop working. Then she flipped her hair and waddled back inside. I wrote it down in my notebook, Monday, 7:06 p.m., blue cord, purple sweater. The camera caught it, to every second of her sneaky little move. I saved the video and leaned back in my chair. She was back to her old tricks, but I wasn't worried. I had something new up my sleeve. See, I'd been thinking all day about how to mess with her even more. Turning off the power was fun, but it wasn't enough. She'd just keep coming back, night after night, until she figured out a way to win. I needed to make her think twice, maybe even scare her a little. So I went to my garage that afternoon and dug through my tools. I've got a big box full of stuff: screwdrivers, hammers, wires, all kinds of things I use to fix bikes and toys. I found something perfect, a little buzzer. It's a tiny black box with a button that makes a loud noise when you press it, like beep beep beep. I'd used it once for a Halloween prank, and it was super annoying. I grinned. This could work. I took the buzzer and some tape, then went outside when it was still light out. I stuck the buzzer right next to my outlet, hiding it under a bush so Karen wouldn't see it. I ran a little wire from the buzzer to the outlet, so when she plugged in her cord, it set off the noise. It wasn't hard to do, I'm good at fixing things, remember. I tested it with my own plug, and sure enough, beep beep beep. It was loud, like a car alarm. I yanked the plug out quick and turned it off. Perfect. Now I just had to wait for Karen to try again. Tuesday night came, and I was ready. I sat by my window, watching her driveway. At 7:04 p.m., she came out, pink slippers, green sweater, blue cord in her hands. My heart started beating fast. This was it. She waddled over, plugged the cord into my outlet, and beep beep beep. The buzzer went off, loud and crazy. Karen jumped back like she'd been stung. Her eyes got huge, and she dropped the cord right there on my grass. She looked around, her head spinning left and right, trying to figure out what was happening. I had to cover my mouth so I wouldn't laugh out loud. She stood there for a second, frozen, then grabbed the cord and ran back to her house. Slam. Her door shut fast. I couldn't believe it worked so well. The camera caught it all, her plugging in, the buzzer going off, her jumping like a scared cat. I saved the video and watched it 3 times, laughing every time she jumped. My notebook got a new line: Tuesday, 7:04 p.m., blue cord, green sweater, buzzer scared her. It was the best thing I'd done yet. She didn't come back out that night, her car stayed quiet, no humming, no nothing. I went to bed smiling, thinking I'd finally gotten her to stop. But deep down, I knew better. Karen wasn't done. Not yet. Wednesday morning, I checked my yard. The blue cord was still there, lying in a pile where she'd dropped it. I picked it up and tossed it back onto her lawn, just like always. I turned off the buzzer, too. I didn't want it going off all day and bugging the neighbors. I sat on my porch with my coffee, waiting to see what she'd do next. Around noon, I saw her come outside. She didn't look at my house, just grabbed the cord, glared at it like it was the cord's fault, and went back in. Her face was all red, and she was muttering something I couldn't hear. I bet she was mad. Good. She deserved it. That night, Wednesday, 7:07 p.m., she tried again. I was watching from my window, ready to flip the buzzer back on if I needed to. She came out with the blue cord, but this time she moved slower. She kept looking around, like she was scared the noise would happen again. She plugged it in real gentle, and nothing. I turned the buzzer off, so it was quiet. Her car started humming, and she stood there, waiting. No beeps, no surprises. After a minute, she nodded to herself and went back inside. I wrote it down: Wednesday, 7:07 p.m., blue cord, pink shirt, no buzzer. The camera got it, too. I didn't turn the buzzer on this time because I wanted her to think it was broken. It was all part of my plan: keep her guessing, keep her nervous. Thursday was different. I decided to mix things up again. I went to the store that afternoon and bought a little sign. It was small, just a piece of wood with a stake you stick in the ground. I took a marker and wrote, "No plugging in here," in big black letters. I stuck it right next to my outlet, so she couldn't miss it. I didn't know if it stopped her, but I figured it'd make her think. That night, Thursday, 7:03 p.m., she came out. I watched her stop and stare at the sign. She bent down, read it, and laughed. Laughed. Then she plugged in the cord anyway, like my sign was a joke. Her car hummed, and she flipped her hair as she walked away. I wrote it down: Thursday, 7:03 p.m., blue cord, purple sweater, ignored sign. The camera caught her laughing, too. It made me mad, but it also made me more determined. She wasn't scared of a sign. Fine. I'd try something else. Friday night, I turned the buzzer back on. I waited by my window, heart pounding, as she came out at 7:05 p.m. She plugged in the cord, beep beep beep. There it went again. She yelped and jumped back, dropping the cord just like before. This time, she didn't run right away. She kicked the cord, glared at my house, and yelled, "Stop it, Jake." I stayed quiet, hiding behind my curtains. She couldn't see me, but I could see her face all red, hands on her hips. She grabbed the cord and stormed back to her house. Slam. The door shut hard. I wrote it down, Friday, 7:05 p.m., blue cord, pink slippers, buzzer again, she yelled. The video was perfect, her yelling, the buzzer blaring, everything. I had her on tape, and she knew I was fighting back. Saturday came, and I checked my electricity bill in the mail. It was higher, way higher than last month. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the numbers. All that extra money was because of her car, sucking up my power night after night. I folded the bill and put it with my notebook. That was more proof she was costing me real money. I wasn't just mad anymore, I was ready to end this. She couldn't keep stealing from me like this. I had my videos, my notes, my buzzer, everything was coming together. But I needed one more thing. Something big. That night, Saturday, 7:08 p.m., she came out again. No buzzer this time. I turned it off to keep her guessing. She plugged in the cord, and her car hummed. She looked at my house for a long time before going back inside, like she was waiting for something to happen. I didn't do anything. I just watched and wrote it down, Saturday, 7:08 p.m., blue cord, green sweater, no buzzer. The camera got it, too. I was letting her think she'd won, just for a little while. It was all part of my plan: lure her in, make her feel safe, then hit her with something she'd never expect. Sunday morning, I talked to Mr. Thompson again. He was watering his tomatoes, and I walked over. "She's still at it," I said. "Every night." He shook his head. "You gotta stop her, Jake. She's a thief." I nodded. "I'm working on it," I said. "Got a plan?" he asked. I smiled. "Yep. A big one." He grinned back. "Good. Give her what she deserves." I didn't tell him what it was, not yet. But talking to him made me feel stronger. The neighbors were on my side, even if they didn't know everything. Sunday night, I tried something new. I took a little lock, a tiny padlock from my garage, and put it on the outlet cover. It's got a flap that closes over the plugs, and I locked it shut so she couldn't get in. At 7:06 p.m., she came out, blue cord, purple sweater. She bent down, saw the lock, and froze. She tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. She stood up, glared at my house, and stomped back inside. No humming, no charging. I wrote it down, Sunday, 7:06 p.m., blue cord, purple sweater, lock stopped her. The camera caught her tugging and stomping, more proof. I grinned. Another win. Monday morning, I saw her outside with a screwdriver. She was poking at the lock, trying to get it off. I watched from my porch, sipping my coffee. She didn't see me at first. She twisted and pulled, but the lock held tight. I'd made sure of that. After a minute, she looked up, saw me, and dropped the screwdriver. "This is ridiculous, Jake," she yelled. I just shrugged and said, "Stop stealing my power, Karen." She huffed, picked up her screwdriver, and marched back to her house. I wrote it down, Monday morning, tried to break lock, yelled at me. The camera didn't catch it, it's only for night, but I had my eyes. She was getting desperate. That night, Monday, 7:07 p.m., she didn't even try. She came out, looked at the lock, and went back inside. No cord, no nothing. I wrote it down, Monday, 7:07 p.m., gave up. The camera got her walking away. It was the first night in weeks she didn't plug in. I thought maybe she'd stop for good. But I wasn't dumb. Karen doesn't quit that easy. She was probably planning something, too. I had to stay one step ahead. Tuesday night, she came back with a new trick. At 7:04 p.m., she waddled out with a long black cord different from the blue one. She didn't go to my outlet this time. Nope. She went to her own garage, plugged it in there, and stretched it across her lawn to her car. I watched from my window, confused. Was she giving up on my power? I wrote it down, Tuesday, 7:04 p.m., black cord, used her own outlet. The camera didn't catch it, it's aimed at my yard, not hers. But I saw it. Her car hummed, and she went back inside. I scratched my head. Maybe the lock worked. Maybe she was done. But something told me it wasn't over. Wednesday morning, I saw why. That black cord? It wasn't plugged into her garage anymore. It was snaking across my yard again, hooked up to my outlet under the lock. She'd pried the cover open somehow, probably with that screwdriver, and jammed the plug in. Her car was humming when I woke up. I ran outside, unplugged it, and tossed it back. The lock was bent, hanging loose. She'd broken it. I wrote it down: Wednesday morning, black cord, broke lock. I was mad, really mad. She wasn't stopping. She was fighting back. That's when I knew this was bigger than I thought. Karen wasn't just bold, she was sneaky and tough. But so was I. I had my notebook, my videos, my tricks. I'd scared her with the buzzer, stopped her with the lock, and now she'd broken through. It was like a war, and we were both getting better at it. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I went to my garage, grabbed some new tools, and started planning. She thought she'd won this round, but I had more surprises coming. Big ones. She had no idea what I was about to do. The big day came. I'd had enough, more than enough. Weeks of Karen sneaking around, plugging her car into my outlet, stealing my electricity. It was too much. I wasn't mad anymore, I was ready. Ready to end it? I'd been planning for days, working in my garage, thinking up something perfect. Not just a little trick like the buzzer or the lock, no, this was bigger. Way bigger. I waited until the sun went down, sitting by my window, watching her driveway like always. My heart was thumping, but I wasn't scared. I was excited. Tonight was the night Karen would learn she couldn't mess with me anymore. Around 7:05 p.m., she came out. Same old Karen, pink slippers, purple sweater, that black cord in her hands. She'd been using that new cord ever since she broke my lock, thinking she'd won. She waddled across my yard, flipped her hair like she always did, and plugged it into my outlet. She'd figured out how to shove it under the bent cover, and her car started humming right away. That hum used to make me mad, but tonight it made me smile. She tugged the cord tight, looked around quick, and went back inside. Slammed her door shut. She thought she was safe. She thought she'd gotten away with it again. Oh, she had no idea what was coming. I waited a minute, just 1 minute, to make sure she was settled. Then I flipped the switch. Literally. See, I'd rigged my outlet with a little surprise. It wasn't dangerous or anything, I'd never hurt anyone. It was just a tiny gadget I built myself in my garage. I'm good at fixing things, remember? Bikes, toys, all that stuff. This time, I'd made something special. I took a little box, some wires, a speaker, and some lights I had lying around. I hooked it all up to my outlet so that when her cord plugged in, it set off my trap. And boy, did it work. The moment her car started charging, boom. A loud alarm blared from my yard. Wee-oh-oh-oh, wee-oh-oh-oh, wee-oh-oh-oh. It was so loud you could hear it down the street like a fire truck or a police car. Lights flashed, 2 red and blue ones I'd stuck under my bushes. They blinked fast, lighting up my whole yard like a party. And then the best part, a recorded voice I'd made with my phone shouted out, "Warning. Electricity theft detected. Warning. Electricity theft detected." It kept going, over and over, loud and clear. I'd recorded it myself, talking slow and serious, then hooked it up to the speaker. It was perfect, better than I'd even hoped. Karen bolted outside so fast I almost missed it. Her door flew open, and there she was, her face red as a tomato. Her hair was messy now, not all perfect like usual, and her eyes were huge. She ran into her driveway, staring at my yard like she couldn't believe what was happening. Wee-oh-oh-oh, wee-oh-oh-oh. The alarm kept screaming, and the lights kept flashing red, blue, red, blue. She put her hands over her ears and yelled, "What is this?" But she couldn't stop it. The cord was still plugged in, and my gadget was doing its job. That's when the neighbors started peeking out. Mr. Thompson opened his window across the street, his straw hat still on even though it was night. His mouth dropped open, and he just stared. Mrs. Lee's curtains moved, and I saw her little dog Max barking like crazy. Down the street, the family with the 2 kids stepped onto their porch, the mom holding a phone like she was recording it. Everyone was watching now, watching Karen standing there, caught like a mouse in a trap. I took a deep breath and stepped onto my porch. This was my moment. I held up my phone in one hand. It had all my videos, weeks of proof showing her sneaking around, plugging in that cord night after night. My other hand stayed in my pocket, cool and calm. "Hey, Karen," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My voice was strong, no shaking, no fear. "Next time, charge your car with your money." The crowd gasped, big, loud gasps like in a movie. Mr. Thompson clapped his hands once, then stopped, still staring. Mrs. Lee's dog barked even louder. Karen froze right where she was, her hands dropping from her ears. Her face went from red to white, like all the color drained out. She knew she'd been caught and there was no way out. I turned my phone so she could see the screen. I hit play on one of the videos, the one from last week where she yelled at me after the buzzer went off. You could hear her voice clear as day, "Stop it, Jake." The alarm kept going in the background, wee-oh-oh-oh, but my phone was loud enough to cut through it. Her eyes got even bigger, and her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She just stood there, staring at me, then at the neighbors, then back at me. The video kept playing, her kicking the cord, stomping away, all of it. "I've got more," I said, waving the phone. "Lots more. Every night you stole my electricity, I caught you." The neighbors started whispering. Mr. Thompson called out, "She's been stealing." Mrs. Lee nodded from her window and said, "I knew it." The mom down the street shook her head, still holding her phone up. Karen looked around, her head spinning like she didn't know where to go. The alarm wouldn't stop, wee-oh-oh-oh, and that voice kept shouting, "Warning. Electricity theft detected." It was like the whole neighborhood was yelling at her now. She took a step back, then another, her slippers sliding on her driveway. This isn't fair," she finally yelled, her voice all shaky. "You're making a big deal out of nothing, Jake." "Nothing," I said, stepping off my porch onto the grass. "You've been taking my power for weeks. I've got the bills to prove it higher every month because of you." I pointed at her car, still hooked up to the cord, still trying to charge even with all the noise. "That's not your outlet, Karen. It's mine. And I'm done letting you use it." The crowd got louder, more whispers, more gasps. Mr. Thompson shouted, "That's right, Jake. Tell her." Karen's face twisted up, like she was going to cry or scream or both. But she didn't. She just stood there, caught, with nowhere to hide. I walked over to my outlet, the lights flashing around me like I was in some big show. I bent down, flipped a little switch on my gadget to turn off the alarm, and pulled her cord out. The wee-oh-oh-oh stopped, the lights went dark, and the voice quit shouting. It was quiet now, super quiet. You could hear crickets chirping again, and Max barking in the distance. I held up her black cord and tossed it onto her lawn. It landed with a thud, right next to her perfect flowers. "No more," I said, looking her straight in the eyes. "You're done." Karen didn't move at first. She just stared at me, then at the cord, then at the neighbors still watching. Her hands clenched into fists, and her mouth opened again. You can't do this," she sputtered. "I'm the HOA president. I make the rules around here." I shook my head and held up my phone again. "Not this time," I said. "Stealing's against the rules, too. And I've got proof." I tapped the phone with my finger. "Videos, dates, times, everything. Want me to send it to the HOA? Or maybe the police?" Her jaw dropped, and she took another step back. She didn't say anything, just stared like she couldn't believe it. That's when the big reveal really hit her. She thought I was just quiet Jake, the guy who mows his lawn and stays out of trouble. She thought she could boss me around, take what she wanted, and I'd never fight back. But I wasn't that guy, not tonight. I'd been watching, planning, building my trap. The notebook, the camera, the buzzer, the lock, all of it led to this. I wasn't just some pushover. I was smart, and I'd caught her red-handed in front of everyone. She didn't see it coming, and now she couldn't run from it. The neighbors started clapping, slow at first, then louder. Mr. Thompson banged his hand on his window frame and yelled, "Good job, Jake." Mrs. Lee smiled and waved, her little dog still yapping. The mom down the street put her phone down and clapped, too, her kids jumping up and down like it was a party. Karen's face went red again, but not from running this time. She was embarrassed, super embarrassed. She looked around, saw all those eyes on her, and finally turned away. She stomped back to her house, her slippers slapping the ground, and slammed her door so hard the flamingos on her lawn shook. I stood there on my grass, my phone still in my hand, and took a deep breath. The air felt cool now, and the stars were popping out in the sky. My yard was quiet again, no humming, no cords, no Karen. I looked at my outlet, the little gadget still sitting there, and smiled. It worked. My plan worked. I'd built it all myself, step by step, and it paid off. She couldn't argue, couldn't lie, couldn't boss her way out of this one. The neighbors saw it, and they knew the truth. Karen wasn't the queen anymore, not tonight. I waved at Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Lee, then went back to my porch. I sat down in my chair, my heart still beating fast but happy now. The crowd started to go back inside, windows closed, doors shut, voices faded away. But I knew they'd talk about this for weeks. "Did you see Jake stop Karen?" they'd say. "She didn't know what hit her." And they'd be right. She didn't. I leaned back and looked at her house. Her lights were on, but her curtains stayed shut. She was probably in there, mad as a hornet, but she couldn't do anything about it. Not anymore. I played the video on my phone one more time just for me. We oh. Warning. Electricity theft detected. Karen jumping out, her face all red, the neighbors gasping. It was perfect. I saved it again, just to be safe, and put my phone down. My gadget was still by the outlet, ready if she tried again. But I didn't think she would not after this. She'd been caught, and everyone knew it. I'd taught her a lesson, and it felt so good. The night got quieter, and I stayed on my porch a little longer. The crickets sang, the stars twinkled, and my house felt like mine again. No more cords, no more humming, no more Karen sneaking around. I'd won not with yelling or fighting, but with my brain. I'd built something, planned something, and made it work. She thought she was smarter, but I showed her I was the smart one all along. And that was the best part of all. After that big night, the night with the loud alarm and flashing lights, Karen didn't dare touch my outlet again. Not even once. It was like she'd learned her lesson, and she wasn't going to mess with me anymore. That we oh sound and the warning. Electricity theft detected, voice must have stuck in her head, because she stayed away from my yard like it was on fire. I'd sit on my porch every evening, sipping my lemonade or coffee, watching her house just to be sure. No pink slippers, no purple sweaters, no cord snaking across my grass. Nothing. Her shiny white car stayed in her driveway, quiet and still, like it was scared of me, too. I smiled every time I saw it. Peace at last. The next day, Friday morning, I woke up feeling good. Really good. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and my yard looked normal again. No cords, no mess. I made some cereal, cornflakes with milk, and sat at my kitchen table, thinking about what happened. Karen's red face, the neighbors clapping, my little gadget working like magic. It all played in my head like a movie. I'd won. Not with yelling or fighting, but with my brain. I'd caught her stealing, showed everyone the truth, and made her stop. It felt awesome, like I was a superhero who saved the day. But it didn't end there. Oh no, there was more coming, big stuff. That afternoon, I got a letter in my mailbox. It was from the HOA, the Homeowners Association, the group Karen always bossed around. The letter said there'd be a meeting that night at 7 p.m. at the community center down the street. Everyone in the neighborhood was invited. It didn't say why, but I had a feeling it was about Karen. I mean, after all that noise and drama, how could it not be? I folded the letter, put it on my table, and grinned. This was going to be good. I spent the day doing normal stuff, mowing my lawn, fixing a flat tire on my bike, watering my little flower pot on the porch. Every time I went outside, I'd look at my outlet. The gadget was still there, tucked under the bush, quiet now but ready if I needed it. The bent lock was still hanging off the cover, but I didn't fix it yet. I liked it that way, a little reminder of how Karen tried to break in and failed. Neighbors waved at me more than usual. Mr. Thompson shouted, "Hey, Jake. Nice work last night, from his garden. Mrs. Lee popped out with a plate of cookies chocolate chip, my favorite, and said, "You're a hero, Jake." Even her dog Max wagged his tail at me. It was weird, but nice. I wasn't used to all that attention. At 6:45 p.m., I put on a clean shirt, blue, nothing fancy, and walked to the community center. It's just a small building with a big room inside, some chairs, and a table up front. When I got there, it was already full of people, neighbors I knew and some I didn't. Mr. Thompson was there, sitting near the front with his straw hat on his lap. Mrs. Lee was next to him, holding Max on a leash. The family down the street, the one with the 2 kids, was there, too, the mom still holding her phone like she might record something. Everyone was talking, whispering, pointing at me when I walked in. I waved and found a seat in the back. My stomach felt all fluttery, but I kept my cool. At 7 o'clock sharp, the HOA people started the meeting. There were 3 of them up front, 2 men and a lady, all wearing serious faces. The lady, Mrs. Carter, was in charge. She had gray hair and glasses, and she held a big stack of papers. "Okay, everyone," she said, banging a little hammer on the table. "Quiet down. We've got some business to talk about tonight." The room got quiet fast. Everyone wanted to hear this. I leaned forward in my chair, my hands on my knees. I had a feeling something big was coming. Mrs. Carter cleared her throat and looked at her papers. "We're here to talk about a problem in our neighborhood," she said. A rule was broken. A big rule. She looked up, and her eyes landed on Karen's spot. Yep, Karen was there sitting in the front row, arms crossed, her face all tight like she was mad. She had on a bright red shirt that said HOA Boss in big letters, but she didn't look like a boss tonight. She looked nervous. I smiled to myself. "Good. Jake," Mrs. Carter said, pointing at me. "Can you come up here, please?" My heart jumped, but I stood up and walked to the front. Everyone watched me, dozens of eyes following every step. I stood next to Mrs. Carter, my phone in my pocket, ready if I needed it. "Jake's got something to show us," she said. "Go ahead, Jake." I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. "Karen's been stealing my electricity," I said, loud and clear. "For weeks. She plugged her car into my outlet every night, and I caught her." The room buzzed, whispers and gasps everywhere. Karen jumped up from her chair. "That's not true," she yelled, her voice all high and squeaky. "He's lying." I didn't say anything back, not yet. I just held up my phone and hit play on the video from the big night. The screen lit up, and there it was, Karen plugging in her cord, the alarm going wee-oh-oh-oh, wee-oh-oh-oh, the lights flashing, and that voice shouting, "Warning. Electricity theft detected." You could see her jump, her face turn red, and her run back inside. The whole room went quiet, then exploded, people talking, pointing, laughing. Karen's mouth dropped open. That's not fair," she sputtered. "It's just a little power." Mrs. Carter banged her hammer again. "Quiet," she said. "Jake, do you have more?" I nodded. "Lots more," I said. "Videos from weeks, every night she did it. And my bills, they're higher because of her." I pulled the latest bill from my pocket, the one I'd gotten that week, and handed it to Mrs. Carter. She looked at it, then showed it to the other HOA people. They nodded, whispering to each other. Karen sat down hard, her arms still crossed. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "I'm the president. I don't steal." Mrs. Carter looked at her, her glasses shining under the lights. "Stealing electricity isn't just rude, Karen," she said. "It's illegal. And we've got proof." She held up my bill and pointed at my phone. "Jake caught you. Misuse of property, that's against HOA rules, too." The room buzzed again. Mr. Thompson clapped his hands and shouted, "That's right." Mrs. Lee nodded, petting Max, who barked like he agreed. Mrs. Carter banged her hammer one more time. "We've decided," she said. "Karen, you're fined $200 for misuse of property. And you're on probation, no more HOA boss stuff for 6 months." Karen's face went white, then red again. "What?" she yelled, jumping up. "You can't do that." "We can," Mrs. Carter said, calm as anything. "Rules are rules. Sit down." Karen tried to argue. She waved her arms and said, This is unfair. Jake's making it up. But my video shut her up fast. Mrs. Carter played it again, and everyone saw the truth. Karen flopped back into her chair, her head down, quiet for once. The meeting didn't last much longer. Mrs. Carter thanked me, and I went back to my seat. People clapped, loud claps that echoed in the room. Mr. Thompson gave me a thumbs up, and Mrs. Lee smiled big. The family down the street cheered, the kids bouncing in their chairs. Karen didn't say another word, she just sat there, staring at the floor. When the meeting ended, people came up to me, shaking my hand, patting my back. "You did it, Jake," Mr. Thompson said. "She deserved it," Mrs. Lee added, handing me another cookie. I smiled and thanked them. It felt good, really good. When I walked home that night, the street was quiet. Stars were out, and the air was cool. Neighbors waved from their porches, and for once, Karen's house was dark, no lights, no movement. She was keeping her head down, just like I'd hoped. I got to my house, sat on my porch, and looked at my yard. No cords, no humming, just peace. I'd fixed my outlet that morning, took off the bent lock, pulled out the gadget, and made it normal again. But I kept that alarm handy just in case. I put it in my garage, right on my tool shelf, ready if she ever tried anything again. I didn't think she would, though, not after all this. The next day, Saturday, I checked my mailbox. No bills, just a little note from Mrs. Lee. It said, "Thanks, Jake. You're the best," with a smiley face. I stuck it on my fridge with a magnet. Later, I saw Mr. Thompson outside, and he gave me a big, juicy tomato from his garden. "For the hero," he said, winking. I laughed and took it inside. Best tomato I'd ever had. Neighbors kept smiling at me when I walked by, and some even clapped, like I was famous. It was weird, but I liked it. For once, I wasn't just quiet Jake, I was the guy who stopped Karen. Karen didn't come outside much after that. I'd see her sometimes, driving her car real slow, but she never looked at me. No more hair flips, no more snotty smirks. Her flamingos stayed on her lawn, but she didn't polish her car every day anymore. It just sat there, quiet, like she'd given up showing off. One time, I caught her peeking out her window, but when she saw me, she shut the curtain fast. She was embarrassed, super embarrassed, and she couldn't boss anyone around now. The HOA fine hit her hard, I guess, and losing her boss title made it worse. Good. She'd earned it. My electricity bill came a week later, and guess what? It was back to normal, no extra money, no big numbers. Just what I usually pay to keep my lights on and my fridge cold. I sat at my table, looking at it, and smiled. No more Karen stealing my power, no more humming in the night. I'd fixed it, all of it. My yard was mine again, my house was mine again, and I got the peace I deserved. I folded the bill and put it away, happy as could be. Life went back to normal after that, well, mostly. I still mowed my lawn every Saturday, still fixed bikes in my garage, still waved at the neighbors. But things were different now. People treated me like a friend, not just the quiet guy next door. Mr. Thompson started bringing me tomatoes every week, and Mrs. Lee baked me cookies whenever she felt like it. The kids down the street rode their bikes by my house and yelled, "Hi, Jake," every time. It was nice, really nice. I didn't need all that attention, but I didn't mind it either. Karen stayed quiet for weeks. No more HOA meetings where she waved her rulebook around, no more yelling at people about their grass or mailboxes. I heard from Mrs. Lee that she tried to argue with the HOA again, sent them a long letter saying it wasn't fair. But they didn't budge. My videos were too good, my proof too strong. She had to pay the fine $200 right out of her pocket and sit on the sidelines for 6 months. Mrs. Carter took over as HOA boss, and everyone liked her better. She didn't boss people around, just made sure things stayed fair. Karma's sweet, isn't it? That's what they call it when someone gets what they deserve, and Karen sure did. One day about a month later, I saw something funny. Karen's car was gone. I was outside, sweeping my porch, when I noticed her driveway was empty. No shiny white car, no red bow, nothing. I asked Mr. Thompson about it later. "She sold it," he said, picking a tomato. "Got a regular car now, one with gas. Guess she didn't want to charge anything anymore." He laughed, and I did, too. No more electric car meant no more stealing my power. She'd learned her lesson the hard way. I kept that alarm gadget in my garage, just like I said. It's still there now, sitting on my shelf next to my tools. Sometimes I pick it up, turn it on wee-oh-oh-oh, and laugh. It's a little reminder of the night I won. I don't need it anymore. Karen's not coming back, but I like having it. My outlet's normal now, just a little plug on the side of my house. I use it for my Christmas lights every winter, and that's it. No cords, no trouble, no Karen. The neighborhood's happier now, too. People talk more, smile more. Mr. Thompson's tomatoes are still the best, and Mrs. Lee's cookies never stop coming. The kids ride their bikes, the park down the street is full of laughter, and everything feels right. Karen's still around. She didn't move or anything, but she's not the HOA Queen anymore. She's just a neighbor now, like the rest of us. And me? I'm still Jake, quiet Jake who fixes things. But now I'm the guy who stood up to Karen and won. That's a pretty cool thing to be. Every night, I sit on my porch and watch the stars. No more humming, no more sneaking, just peace. My bill's normal, my yard's mine, and I'm happy. Karen got what she deserved, a fine, a lesson, and a big slice of embarrassment. And me? I got my quiet life back, plus a little extra respect from everyone around. It's funny how things work out sometimes. Karma's sweet, isn't it? I think so. And I bet you do, too. So here's the thing, sometimes the people who act like they're untouchable, like nothing can stop them, are the easiest ones to trip up. They walk around all big and loud, thinking they can do whatever they want. They think they're the boss of everyone, and no one will ever push back. But guess what? All it takes is a little smarts to turn the tables, to flip everything around and show them they're not so tough after all. That's what happened with Karen. She thought she could walk all over me, plug her car into my outlet, and take my electricity like it was hers. But I didn't let her. I used my brain, made a plan, and bam, she didn't know what hit her. Don't let anyone push you around. Stand up, fight back, and watch them squirm. That's what I learned, and I want you to learn it, too. Let's think about this for a minute. Karen was the HOA Queen, always bossing people around, waving her rulebook like it was a magic wand. She'd tell Mr. Thompson his tomatoes were too red, or Mrs. Lee her flowers were too tall. She'd smirk and flip her hair, acting like she owned the whole street. Everyone knew her, and nobody liked her, but they didn't stop her either. They just rolled their eyes and let her do her thing. Not me, though. When she started stealing my electricity, I said, nope, not happening. I didn't yell or cry, I just watched her, wrote stuff down, and made my little gadget. She thought she was untouchable, but I tripped her up big time. And you know what? It felt awesome. See, people like Karen, they're not as strong as they look. They act all big because they think no one's brave enough to fight back. They're like bullies at school, the ones who take your lunch or push you in line. They laugh and strut around, thinking they're the king or queen of everything. But here's a secret, they're not. They're just loud. And when someone like me, or maybe you, stands up to them, they don't know what to do. Karen didn't expect my alarm to go wee-oh-oh-oh, wee-oh-oh-oh. She didn't expect the neighbors to see her get caught. She didn't expect me to have videos and a plan. That's why she froze, because all her big, loud power went poof when I turned the tables. I want you to think about that. Have you ever had someone push you around? Maybe a kid at school who takes your stuff, or a friend who always picks the game and never lets you choose. Maybe even a grown-up who acts like they're better than you. It happens to everyone sometimes. It happened to me with Karen. She called me stingy, laughed in my face, and kept plugging in that cord like I didn't matter. But I did matter. I'm Jake, quiet Jake who fixes bikes and mows his lawn, and I wasn't going to let her win. You don't have to let anyone win either. You've got smarts, just like I do. You can figure things out, make a plan, and stand up tall. Let's talk about how I did it, because it's not hard. I didn't punch her or yell, I'm not that guy. I used my head. I watched her every night, wrote down what she did, and caught her on my camera. I made that buzzer to scare her, then the lock to stop her, and finally the big alarm with lights and a voice. Each step was small, but they added up. That's the trick, little things can turn into big wins. You don't need to be loud or mean to fight back. You just need to be smart and brave. And you are way braver than you think. Karen didn't see me coming, and the next time someone pushes you, they won't see you coming either. What's cool is how it all turned out. After that big night, Karen didn't touch my outlet again. The HOA fined her $200 real money she had to pay and took away her boss title for 6 months. She tried to argue, but my videos shut her up fast. The neighbors clapped for me, and she kept her head down. My bill went back to normal, my yard got quiet, and I got my peace back. That's what happens when you stand up. You don't just stop the bully, you get something good out of it. For me, it was peace and cookies from Mrs. Lee. For you, it could be anything, maybe respect, or a chance to play your favorite game, or just feeling proud of yourself. It's worth it, every time. I keep thinking about that night, the alarm blaring, the lights flashing, Karen's red face. It makes me laugh now, but it also makes me feel strong. I wasn't big or loud, but I was smart. I turned the tables, and she squirmed like a worm on a hook. That's what I mean. People who act untouchable aren't really untouchable. They're just waiting for someone to show them they're wrong. And that someone can be you. You don't need fancy gadgets or a camera like I had. You just need a little courage and a good idea. Maybe you tell a teacher, or make a plan with your friends, or find a way to surprise them. Whatever it is, it works. I promise. Let's imagine something together. Picture a kid at school, let's call him Timmy. Timmy's big and loud, always taking other kids' snacks at lunch. He laughs and says, "What are you gonna do about it?" Most kids just give up, they hand over their cookies and walk away. But then there's you. You don't yell at Timmy or cry. You watch him, see how he always goes for the same table. So one day, you hide your snack somewhere else, like in your bag under the table. Timmy comes over, looks around, and finds nothing. He gets mad, stomps his feet, but he can't take what's not there. You eat your snack later, safe and happy. Timmy's not so big now, is he? You turn the tables with a little smarts, just like I did with Karen. That's what I want you to remember, you're stronger than you think. People like Karen or Timmy, they only win if you let them. But if you stand up, even in a quiet way, they lose. I didn't need to be the loudest guy on the street. I didn't need to be the strongest or the meanest. I just needed to be me, Jake, with a notebook, a camera, and a plan. And it worked. My neighbors saw it, Karen felt it, and I proved it. You can prove it, too. Next time someone tries to push you around, don't just sit there. Think. Plan. Fight back. Watch them squirm when you win. I love how it all ended. My porch is my favorite spot now, quiet, peaceful, no cords messing it up. I sit there every night, looking at the stars, sipping my lemonade. Mr. Thompson still brings me tomatoes, and Mrs. Lee's cookies are the best. Karen's still next door, but she's not the same. No more bossing, no more stealing, just a regular neighbor who learned her lesson. I keep my alarm gadget in the garage, just in case, but I don't need it. I've got my peace, my friends, and a story I'll never forget. That's what standing up gets you, not just winning, but something better. So what do you think? Did Karen get what she deserved? I say yes. She took my electricity, acted like a bully, and thought she'd get away with it. But I tripped her up, turned the tables, and showed her she wasn't untouchable. The fine, the embarrassment, the quiet car, it all fit. She squirmed, and I smiled. What about you? Drop it in the comments below. Tell me if you think she got what was coming to her. And tell me your stories, too. Have you ever stood up to someone? Did you make them squirm? I'm dying to hear all about it. This isn't the end, not really. I'll see you in the next story, with more fun, more surprises, and maybe even more tricks up my sleeve. Life's full of Karens out there, but it's full of Jakes, two people like me and you who don't let the bullies win. Keep your smarts ready, keep your courage close, and don't be afraid to fight back. You've got this. I did it, and you can, too. See you soon. Stay awesome.